All right. Good morning. Good morning. This is Sergio Tigera on Gamechangerslive, here live from Miami, Florida. And we have very special guest joining us from the UK. It's Mr. Nick Bradley. Welcome, Nick.
Hey, excellent, Sergio. Glad to be here. Thank you very much.
Awesome, man. Well, Nick is a world-renowned business growth and scale-up specialist who helps exceptional business leaders unlock their full potential. He's the host of the UK's #1 business podcast on iTunes and Spotify, Scale Up Your Business, which has achieved over 100,000 downloads in 130 countries in less than 12 months since launch. Past guests include Neil Patel, David Meltzer, Oren Klaff, John Lee Dumas, Rock Thomas, Patrick Bet-David, and JT McCormick, all stars there. He also works with private equity investors across the UK, the US, Southeast Asia, leading business turnarounds, mergers, acquisitions, and scale-ups. And over the last decade, he's bought, built, and sold multiple businesses, creating significant value for himself and shareholders. And this includes enabling 22 business acquisitions, completing over $5.3 billion in deals across 8 business sectors in 11 countries. He's the co-founder of the Fielding Group, a growth accelerator that helps companies improve business performance in order for entrepreneurs to create freedom, build wealth, and live without limits. Originally from Australia, Nick's a dedicated family man who has a very strong physical background, having completed 67 marathons and 24 ultra marathons worldwide. So unbelievable resume, unbelievable accomplishments. My hat's off to you, my friend. I've only done a few half marathons, and I've been trying to get myself to do a full marathon, and I just haven't been able to do that. So I need some inspiration, buddy.
Wow. That's a great intro, mate. And, it's funny when you were kind of going through that, I was thinking, yeah, man. Yeah, 67 marathons. Do you know what? It's actually more than that, because every Sunday, I don't do this as much anymore, but every Sunday morning before the kids got up, I would actually go and run a marathon as a training event in preparation. So I don't know how many I've actually done, but that's 67 is actually proper events that I've done, actually competition.
Wow. I have a buddy that just ran the virtual London marathon yesterday. Was it yesterday or a couple days ago?
Sunday, yeah, because they had the elites running around this kind of 1.5 mile track in Hyde Park or somewhere. And then there were all these people running around the UK, just around their local parklands and streets and roads and whatever else.
Wow. Well, welcome to the show, my friend. This show, Game Changers, is all around people who have been game changers in their field and have touched the lives or improved the lives of thousands of people. And we'd love to have on guests like you who have excelled in their field. And especially we want to talk around mindset in business, in life. I mean, you've applied that perseverance. We spoke yesterday, and you're talking about how, the people who make it are the people who last, right? Because giving up, it's so much easier. Tell me a little bit about your background, how you got to where you are, and what advice you can give to some people when it comes to that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I often say it's a process of attrition. The ones that can last the longest get the fruits of their labor. But so quick background from me. As you said, originally from Australia. I grew up in a little town called Adelaide. It's actually a city, but we call it the little town of Adelaide in South Australia, which is famous for 3 things. Lots of churches, like crazy amounts of churches, big sharks, as in great white sharks, and serial killers. I kid you not, more serial killers per head of population than any other city in the world.
You're kidding.
No, I'm not. I have no affiliation
in the water over there.
with any of those things. No,
in the water, I guess.
I've been surfing with sharks, like, been out on my board and a shark's gone past, but that's about as close as I've got to any of those 3 things. So I grew up there, and I sort of jest a little bit about it being a little town. But I sort of went to school there, went to university there, started my first business when I was 18 years of age. And that was back in the late 80s. And it was a personal training business. And personal training now, fitness personal training is kind of like, everyone's got a personal trainer or has had a trainer. But back in the late 80s, no one had ever heard of this kind of thing where, someone would kind of, yell at you on a treadmill. And I know. I back then,
paying them to do that. You're paying them to do that, actually.
Oh yeah, I was hardcore, man. But anyway, I created this business from nothing, other than just some inspiration around health and fitness. And and ended up growing that, had a studio within a gym, had employees, and I sold that when I was 21 and ended up going to Sydney to work for Men's Health magazine, where I was the fitness editor and then the marketing manager. So I suppose the first part of my story is I had this entrepreneurial streak in me, and then I got really scared about it. I thought, oh my God, I can't be an entrepreneur for various reasons. And I ended up giving that up and then went into a world of corporate sort of, having a job as an employee for about 15 to 20 years. So there's a lot of learnings in that for people, I think, if I just share that quickly. And we'll talk about mindset, obviously, over the course of the next, half hour or so. But the reason I gave up, I think, on entrepreneurship is I had too many people in my environment at that point in time telling me that it was really hard. You're not going to make it. No one had really been an entrepreneur in my family. It's much safer to get a job.
Right.
And so my programming was get a job. And so that's what I did. But the funny part about that, Sergio, is I was this frustrated entrepreneur all the way through my 15 or so years in corporate. And I was the guy that would always say the challenging stuff. I was always the really kind of annoying guy. I was really vocal, very chippy, not very nice to be around. But what happened, right, is I ended up getting all these promotions. So I ended up being a board director of a pretty large company before I was 30. I was a CEO of a number of different business units before I was 35. And I kind of rose up the ranks very, very quickly. I was making good money, and I entered the world of private equity through that pathway. And anyway, I was kind of involved in that. And then I got into private equity and started playing around that space. And that kind of made my ego get even bigger. And the culmination of this story is this. I had a lot of perceived success. So I had the $1 million house, the Porsche, all the stuff that everyone kind of thinks they want when they're going after their career or whatever.
Yeah.
I wasn't really living to my values. I wasn't living to my own kind of set of beliefs. And I had this event happen whereby I was doing a big private equity deal. And I was surrounded by a lot of people who were just kind of chasing money and just a very toxic environment.
Right.
And one night I went to bed and I literally cracked all the teeth in the back of my jaw. And crazy stuff. I woke up at 3 a.m. I can remember this, thinking that I don't know what had happened. I thought I must have fallen out of bed or something because it felt like I was swelling pain. And I went to the mirror in the bathroom and I could see that my jaw was really swollen. And it felt like I'd been smashed in the face. It felt like I'd been punched. And I got up in the morning and called the doctor, went and saw the doctor. He got me in. I just said, go to the dentist. The dentist said, yeah, you've cracked the last 2 teeth here, the back here, from literally clenching.
Wow.
And yeah, to finish what had happened, I mean, really, really, really crazily, I was just living a really strange existence. I was chasing money. I was chasing significance. I was trying to beat everyone to the next big job. I was becoming a terrible husband and father, and I wasn't really happy with who I was, even though I had all this perceived success, right?
Yeah.
So what I decided to do, and this is kind of the second part of the story, I decided to change everything. And we're going back now about 4 or 5 years ago. And since I've done that, I've had significantly more success in the perception of success, but in terms of how I feel about everything personally, in terms of the bigger impact I'm making on my family, myself, the world, others around me, I managed to pivot everything towards that. And it's been amazing since then.
I was on a call, the last interview, a couple of interviews ago with Peter Taunton, who is the chairman of Lyft Brands that we were talking about earlier. And one of the things he says, listen, I have the $3 million house on the lake in Minnesota. I have the Ferraris, the Porsches, et cetera, et cetera. I live here in Miami. I got everything I need. And it's just, he said that he got to the point where he just kept buying stuff for nothing, right? And it's just, all right, it's not filling the void. It's not giving me, it's not making me feel any better. And so, to that point, you got to that point where you're saying, well, this isn't, I've gone off the rails here a bit, right? And it's not making me, it's not filling that void of making an impact and what really counts in life, right? With family and,
that's right,
and values and stuff. So that's amazing.
Two additional things happened through the course of that, and I'll kind of bring that up. So when I was finishing my corporate gig before I got into the private equity world, I started to get sacked quite a lot. So I ended up going through 2 or 3 jobs in quick succession, pretty senior jobs. And I was becoming very, very unemployable at that stage, but I didn't quite recognize it. Then I met my dad, and my dad left our family when I was 2 and came back into my life in my early 30s. And I found out that he was a really successful entrepreneur. So he had this business. He had his first business up to 7 figures, and then he lost everything in his early 40s when there was a bombing. It was actually the Turkish consulate bombing in Melbourne, like back in, I forget when it was. And then he recreated himself in the next decade. So he became another multimillionaire again in his 50s.
Unbelievable.
And so this is the weird connection. So what happened was this: I realized that I was always an entrepreneur. I had the DNA of entrepreneurship, that curiosity, that passion, but I repressed it in the world of corporate until that became, very obvious. When I met my dad, I realized that I'd been living literally 15 years of someone else's life.
Sure.
And that's when everything started to become stressful. So even though the teeth incident was very much about a lot of pressure in doing, multi-million, $100 million, dollar deals, it was also the fact that I had all this other stuff going on at the same time.
And you had gotten back into the corporate world because you kind of bought into somebody else's opinion as to what you should be doing. And how many of us out there have bought into other people's opinions about what we should be doing with our life instead of kind of following the breadcrumbs, right? Of like the clues as to what gets us excited every day, what drives us, where we can be our best.
Yeah. And, the gift of self-reflection, or the gift of stopping to slow down, slowing down to speed up, is an amazing thing. Because I look back in hindsight and I go, okay, so we can talk about the running separately, because it started off as something very different in terms of what it is now. But all those ultra marathons, 100-mile weeks, I was using that as a way of kind of hiding away from the reality that I was in. Because if you go and do a run like that, you've done half marathons, as you said, the pain that you're in, right, and the mindset, the grit that you have to develop is a very comforting thing. Sounds weird to say that, but if you've got other stuff going on in your life that you don't want to face, then actually having something that's so physically challenging is a really good outlet. So that's why I did all those things over that time.
Absolutely. Yeah. The mental, the mental hurdles, not only like the physical, but the mental self-talk and the chatter that goes on that's just telling you, hey, stop, my body hurts, stop. It's not worth it. Have a seat, take a break. It's going to feel so much better. It creates a tremendous resilience. And I can't even imagine what we're talking about, with ultra marathons. That's like a whole nother level.
It is. Yeah. We talked about this yesterday. We talked about David Goggins and his book Can't Hurt Me.
Yeah.
And in a very small way, because if you read that book, it was definitely my book of the year last year. His world and his life was so much more challenging. I didn't go through that stuff, but the way that he deals with it, or the way that he dealt with it, I can totally empathize with and see why I went down a similar journey.
Right.
But again, talking about the gifts and how that leads into mindset, oh my God, I strengthened myself like to a level now that if I take on any challenge, be that, growing a business to 7 or 8 figures or more, any physical challenges, it's never easy, but I can take myself to a place which allows that to be absolutely congruent and possible.
Yeah. So we're on right now with Nick Bradley, live from the UK. He is a scale-up specialist, investor, and host of the #1 business podcast in the UK called Scale Up Your Business, in 130 countries and plus, and just incredible success. So we're talking about perseverance, mindset, scaling up your business, ultra marathons, a little bit of everything. So tell me what it's like then. You've been in these mergers, these acquisitions, these scale-ups where you're taking companies up to 6, 7, 8 figures and selling them, right? I mean, what does it take to get to that point? Because I think that's probably every entrepreneur's dream, right? Have an exit and then right off into the sunset.
Yeah. And I say, sometimes people disagree with this comment, but I think when you're in the startup phases of a business, you need to have a vision of what you're moving towards. Now, That vision may evolve and change over the entrepreneurial journey that you have. But, I work specifically with people who have the ambition to sell their companies for 8 to 9 figures, right? And I've got clients who sit in both of those realms. And that doesn't mean that they're at like 7 or 8 figures now. They might be quite early stage, but they have the ambition. And the ambition is the key word here, because then, I think if you've got that, then you're going to do what it takes. But to answer your question, so 10 years in private equity, going in there and doing these turnaround scale ups. And I've been involved in 22 specific scale ups, and personally 3 quite large exits. The last one that I was part of was a 2.3 billion exit to one of the biggest private equity firms in the world. That was back 3 years ago. And there are 6 characteristics of these businesses that I always look for. And I think if anyone here is an entrepreneur, and to your point, is asking the question about how do I create scale to be able to get to that, what we call a capital event, the first thing you've got to think about is, do you have a clear purpose? And purpose is a combination of vision and plan. So it's not just the idea of, hey, I want to create all this wealth for myself. It's, do you have a plan that's compelling enough and believable enough to take you there? So that's the first thing. The second thing is, do you have a relentless focus on profitability? And I say that because a lot of businesses these days focus too much on technology, and they don't really understand where value is created, and the value is really created at profit. So for me, it's about understanding how you're going to have that profit first mentality. The third area is around proposition, and that's quite simply not just having a good product or service. It's the whole experience. It's what I call the product ecosystem. It's a way that you think about how you solve a problem better than anybody else. And lots of businesses start with a great proposition, but then they don't evolve quickly enough as the market's evolving. So that's the third. The fourth one is what we call predictability of the right flow of customers coming in, driving recurring revenue. The fifth one is process and automation. So making sure you have streamlined systems that are making the business run like a machine. And the last one, probably the most important one overall, is people. People in terms of the right capability, the right caliber, underpinned by beliefs, values, and a very, very intentional culture. So if you can get all of those things together, working in unison, think of it like an engine that's humming along, every cog is tuned, that's when you're going to maximize value, and that's when you're going to have a business that's so awesome that other people want to buy it.
That's a fantastic process. So plan, profit, proposition, predictability, process, and people.
Purpose at the front end. So purpose is the first one, but yeah, it's what we call. I'll give everyone a link. It's what we call the 6 peaks of value creation. 6 peaks meaning that, if you've ever climbed a mountain, and I know a lot of my friends, I've never done Everest, but it's on the list. You don't climb to the top in one hit. You go to peaks first. So it's the 6 peaks of value creation. And there's an assessment that I've got, which people can do. I'll get people to link into that later on if they want to do something on their business, just to see what they need to work on and focus on.
Absolutely. Those are key items. When somebody starts a business, how often do they actually go out far enough to kind of work from the end, backwards, to say, okay, what am I going to need to exit in terms of scale? Because I think we start building it, and we're doing a lot of the work ourselves, and then you figure out that you kind of just bought yourself a job, and you're not replaceable unless you have a system in place, right? So tell me a little bit about the importance about systems.
I mean, it is, to the first part of your question, it is the $1 billion question. I have a 20-year vision, right? A 20-year vision that I crafted 6 years ago. I'm 46 now, so I started it. So by the time I'm 60, I've got 14 years to complete it, and it's pretty massive. I don't try and get all my clients to do that because it can be overwhelming, but most people have a vision which is too limiting. So what I say is wealth creation is not enough. Wealth is actually quite easy to come by if you put enough focus and discipline into it. It's what's the bigger impact that's going to drive you through the really tough times. So that is the first question, right? And if people haven't got that, you'd be surprised how many business owners aren't thinking like this or thinking big enough. And there's no risk in thinking big enough. So that's the first thing. And then, as you start to scale, the difference between startup and scale up is process and people. And a lot of people don't realize that if you're a really clever entrepreneur, so you're a creative entrepreneur and you've seen this market opportunity, the only thing that's going to get you to one of these big capital events is the ability to build teams, engage people, that could be employees, suppliers, become a great leader, and creating a business which allows you to step away from it. So I've got 7 separate companies right now, and I don't operationally manage any of those companies. I have people in there who run the businesses through process and automation, but I get involved in the strategy. And it's actually possible to have multiple businesses as long as you don't become the bottleneck. So that's why process is such a key part of that.
Yeah, starting off with that vision, like you said, if you can't get to 20 years, perhaps 5 to 10 years at least down the line. But yeah, it's really important to have the vision on the end game. Like, what is it that you're trying to achieve, and also building in, does this business have the characteristics of what I want to be in? I was talking to a client of mine who was looking at a franchise opportunity, but it would take up his nights and weekends for the first 3 years. And he was looking to have more time with his family. So I said, look, this may not be the right fit. And so as we get excited about, oh, the financials look good, but what's the best fit for you in your life and kind of what you want for yourself, right?
It's so important. And when I back to the whole why the 20-year vision, and you're 100% right, that can feel overwhelming. But I went to a Tony Robbins event in Chicago a few years back, before I kind of really started to get super intentional about contribution and purpose and a few other bits and pieces. And he has this process. It's called a Dickens process because it's you may have talked about it on the show before, but it's about looking at your life through the kind of past, present, future tense.
Right.
And one of the things that's really powerful, and it kind of backs up your point, is he goes, have a look into the future, but have a look into the future where it's so far out that some of your choices become more limiting. So that's why I do 20 years. So for me, I've got 2 young daughters. I've had different experiences with my family where they haven't got the ability, they haven't been financially secure to be able to travel and see me and whatever else. So one of the most painful things that I can think about is not being able to provide and be present and be able to kind of have the freedom to be able to see my children grow up and give them the opportunities. So if you can take yourself to that place where it's more painful to not take the action you need to do today, because if you don't take the action, you're not going to see that vision. What often happens, it ignites people to then start to get really, really focused on what they're trying to achieve. But sometimes you have to go that far out to see it before you take the decision in the moment to actually make a difference.
So having a clear why you're going into business is critical, and having that focus of the end game helps you eliminate kind of things that you're not going to do today, and where you're going to actually put your focus to be able to get there.
Yeah, and there's a piece where when we can talk about how you make that even more precise, because the reason why Scale Up Your Business, my podcast, went to #1 very quickly in the UK, and I think it hit number 17 in the US business charts at its peak, was because it's about business and it's about the skill set of business. It's about the 6 peaks, but it's actually about who you are as a person. It's the identity of the entrepreneur. It's about your mindset. And I talk a lot about my journey and the journey that I've seen from the emotional and mental perspective, because I still think that's the thing that unlocks people's ability to create extraordinary lives, to create extraordinary businesses.
How do you get past setbacks? Because entrepreneurs are going to hit more setbacks than anybody, right? And the problem is you don't see them coming, and you don't know what you don't know. As you're kind of feeling your way in there, and you think you got everything planned out, and then all of a sudden you get hit in the teeth and you get knocked down. How have you gotten back up from setbacks in your life?
Yeah, okay, it's a really good question. So fear is the thing that stops us doing anything, right? And remember, fear, there's all sorts of acronyms for fear, like false evidence appearing real and all this stuff. Right. But the reality of it is the ability to manage fear, not conquer fear. The ability to manage fear is the secret to achieving most things. And so what I mean by that is you're never going to conquer fear, because fear is there to protect us. We can go into why and all that, but the management of fear is about the ability to feel fear, but understand what it really is, and to be able to take action in the moment. Okay. And so what I find is that's the first place to start. So, I'll get scared if I'm going to go and sign a big check or do a big deal. It's not that I'm bulletproof, right? I can feel that fear, but I know how to manage my state well enough to go through it. And the way you do that, it comes a little bit back to the whole ultra marathons and the David Goggins stuff that we mentioned previously, is it's through repetition. It's through facing the fear or putting yourself in situations which challenges your perception of it. So if I talk about a 100-mile race, just very quickly to make the example, the reason I do those sorts of ultra endurance events is there is 100% no certainty that you're going to finish, and it's called a DNF, a did not finish. Okay, which is basically a fail. So this is fun. This is fascinating, right? And you know, I've had quite a few DNFs as much as I've had some great races. But the reality of it is I'm putting myself into a place which is super uncomfortable, super uncertain, because I know that the chance of winning or losing is I don't know. I can do everything I can. But as soon as you start to face that more and more, you build up the muscle, and then you start to be able to take on bigger challenges. And that's how you can become better at dealing with that uncertainty.
Yeah. So resilience, grit, perseverance are key elements that a lot of employers are looking for these days, that are key elements for successful people, right? Like you said, you know, they started off with, okay, who can last the longest?
Yeah, exactly. It is a process of attrition because, you know, one of the I had John Lee Dumas on my podcast, and he's a great example of someone who is relentlessly focused on consistency. I think he said to me he did 260 podcast episodes in a row every day.
Wow.
And no one listened in the beginning. And now he's making, I think he told me last month, he's making 13 million a year just off his podcast.
Wow.
and this is the point. The point is, I said to him, why were you successful? Right. And he goes, because I didn't give up.
That's right.
I didn't see success. I didn't see like, you know, $1 million after my first 10 episodes of my podcast. I didn't see any success until I'd done 250 of the bloody things. But, you know, that's the kind of hope for all of us, isn't it? But he didn't give up. And most people give up. Most people give up when they don't see immediate gratification for the work that they're putting in.
Especially these days. And we talk about the flywheel, like in the MBA program, you always hear about the, you know, the massive 70-foot flywheel that you're trying to turn. And, you know, that first, you know, the first half an hour, the first year, whatever it is a lot of effort and very few results. And, you know, because people are expecting the results quickly now, they drop off. And those that keep pushing those incremental gains, you're starting to gain momentum. And you don't really know how close you are to success. I mean, it could be right around the corner and you just stopped. And you know,
yeah, it often is. I mean, I think back now to so when I did the first episode of the podcast, I batch recorded 6 episodes. I had a mentor at the time, and he said to me, you know, it's a little bit like Netflix. When someone likes it, they'll want to binge it. So I did 6 episodes, and then I launched them, and I had 15 downloads in my first one. All right, I'm now sort of 5,000 to 10,000 an episode, or a bit more than that. Right. But you know, all of a sudden, it just started to grow. But when I was looking at it every single week, it wasn't growing. Right, I just had to forget about it and focus on the practice. Right. And then after a while, I had all these people getting in touch with me, and like you start to get inspiration from the fact that you're helping people. But yeah, a lot of people give up in the beginning because they don't see, as I said, that immediate result.
Absolutely. Well, Nick Bradley on here with us on Game Changers Live. For those of you who enjoyed this podcast and this video cast, please share it with a friend. Share it with somebody that you think might want to appreciate this message. We are on YouTube at Get Game Changers Live, as well as gamechangerslive.co. You can catch this episode and all the rest that we've had on there. A lot of inspirational people on there, and a lot of great advice from people like Nick. Nick, thank you so much for being on, my brother. I appreciate it.
Oh, man, it's awesome. I was looking forward to this. I knew it was going to be a great conversation, so I very much appreciate you having me on the show.
Fantastic. Take care, guys. Have a good one.